fictional friends, and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Meaghan.
And I'm Arthur.
And people are confused right now. Actually, you know what? That's not true. I think people who listen to, like, maybe the last few episodes of this month, and possibly, like, last month, and possibly, like, leading up to that, too. We've definitely mentioned, like, over the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 months at different times that Shireen was pregnant, and she'd be taking time off.
Right.
To deal with that. So in the meantime, I am not interesting enough to talk to myself for a half hour at a time.
No?
No. So Arthur stepped in to help me with all of that. Basically, if anybody's like not aware, he is sort of the co-creator of the website.
I guess I put it all together. I work in the back end and the background to just make sure that things happen and look good.
Yeah, he's the only reason that the site looks good, just for anybody who's wondering. Anybody who goes to fullybooked.ca, which you can do, and anybody who signs up for the newsletter, the only reason any of that happens is because of him. If not, it would be very bare bones over there.
I just code things and magic happens. I don't know.
Yeah, you see, you say that, but I don't know how to code anything. So it would be a really lame looking blog, I get the feeling, if I were the only person doing anything with it. So for the next TBD amount of time,
nice.
Arthur's joining me to co-host the podcast also, and just taking on a new role so that we can actually still be bouncing ideas off of each other and have something to talk about. And that's okay, because you also read and know what we're talking about. I don't know, 60% of the time.
60% of the time.
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
It's okay, I might like it, then Shireen has to fight me back.
Yeah, that's it, and then they'll have to, like, have a battle and everything. Maybe you could joust or have some sort of gladiator tournament to determine who's gonna,
storm wrestling.
Come take back over. My spot's never in discussion, apparently. It's just me forever, even if people hate it. Okay, so we're kicking off 2025. Yay. It's a whole new year. It's not a new year when we're recording this, but when you guys are hearing this, it's a whole new year.
We're in 2025. Everything's different.
We're a few days into 2025, and hopefully it doesn't suck so far for everyone. That's my hope more than anything. And we're kicking off, that's it, like a whole new wave of content, basically. I think we're kind of going to play it by ear for these first at least like X number of months and sort of see how things go. Like we've got, with a new co-host and stuff, maybe we'll want to do things a little bit differently. I have no idea what we're going to decide to do.
Sci-Fi for the next half a year.
Okay, we're not doing that. Okay, like I love you, but I don't love you that much. No, that's not what we're doing. But obviously, that being said, for the month of January, this is the first time in over, I think, 2 years that we're actually covering science fiction on the podcast.
That's not right. That's not okay.
I know. It's one of the most, sort of major genres out there. And it's just because Shireen and I read so little of it that it's really, really, really hard to find the motivation and also the ideas to, I feel like when you and I sat down and decided to plan out the month of January, within 10 minutes we were like, okay, that's it, and we were done. But her and I have tried to do this before, and we're like, oh my God, it's so hard. We can't come up with any ideas. So
bring Dan.
Oh my
we'll
God,
do it for half a year.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I wouldn't even be surprised. I think when we were planning on doing this, Shireen was telling me that her husband, Dan, was already like, I could be on the podcast and stuff. And I was like, aren't you going to be busy with the baby?
It's fine.
It's fine.
Put it on the table.
We have a whole new mini contributor on the podcast, too, because we have an honorary niece now. So, yay. It's our one opportunity, really. Your brother's too young. We don't know if he's ever going to have kids. So, this is our only chance to be the cool aunt and uncle. We're never going to get it otherwise. I'm an only child. Okay, yes. So that's it. For the month of January, we're talking about all things science fiction. So, we'll be talking about different genres, mashups, some adaptations that have done well, some that have done incredibly poorly. And we're just going to kind of make our way through the whole month and talk about some newer stuff and everything. Anybody who maybe is here because you're actually interested in hearing about sci-fi and has been into like Silo and stuff like that, we'll definitely be talking about that in the coming weeks. Which is, probably going to be an easy conversation because you're obsessed with Silo.
Love it. Watch it all. Read it all.
He loves it so much.
And I'm writing about it as well.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, that's it. Actually, if you guys head over to the website, there are probably semi-regular articles every time there's a season of Silo that's out of just you talking about different stuff. If you guys can hear that, it's the cats. Books that are published that have like a lot of crossovers between genres and kind of get an idea of maybe not what, like maybe just per our own opinions, what the best sort of genre mashups with science fiction are.
What some of the more fun ones that exist?
I mean, yeah, that's it. And maybe like what like some of we, I mean, mostly by we I mean you, have enjoyed when you've read them before.
I mean, I'm all into sci-fi in general, hard science, and horror sci-fi.
You haven't read Three Body Problem yet, though.
No, not yet.
Which I feel like is going to be one of those that'll probably...
It's going to suck me in. You won't see me come out of the room for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's it. Those will be like the times. Normally I'm the one who's just kind of like getting through like a full book in like a short period of time. But those will probably be the times that you'll be like, oh, no, please stop talking. I'm just going to go read for 3 days. If we're getting into some of like the mashups or some of the, I don't know, crossovers and stuff that you have. I mean, you can say that about any genre, right? Like a ton of different genres out there obviously have crossovers. Some of them are more popular than others. Like obviously if I'm thinking of things from like fantasy romance, massive. Yeah. It's everywhere. And that's like a huge part of the fantasy industry right now. But obviously when you get into science fiction, you find the same kinds of things, right? So when I was digging a little bit and like, you know, looking for examples of some stuff I came across something that I didn't really necessarily think ahead of time that like science fiction and mystery would be such a heavy crossover, but they definitely seem to be like a hefty number of books out there that kind of combine the two of them, right?
It's amazing. And I'm surprised that you haven't like read a lot of them, because I know you like mystery stuff, but
I know.
There's so many of them, and some of them are like closed room mysteries, and it just has some sci-fi elements. Some of it just happens on a space station, whatever.
Well, so I think that I think that's actually probably a good point, because I think, for a lot of people who maybe like myself aren't super into sci-fi as a whole, we can't help but kind of automatically go in with the assumption that like sci-fi automatically means that things are taking place in space, or they're on another planet, or this is happening, or that's like, they're only to do with astronauts or, alien races and things. And yeah, fine, that probably makes up a really large percent of the genre.
Yeah.
But you can find a lot of other stuff within that sphere. I guess the thing that I wind up finding the closest to thing, like the type of genre that I want to read, is probably like getting into like the dystopian aspect of it, because a lot of those, not all of them, but a lot of those are like firmly set on Earth and are maybe either during or following like an apocalyptic event of some kind. And those I always find are easy to relate to, I guess, because, they're set in a world that like makes sense to me. I'm not good with space stuff in general. So I find I have a tendency like not to, but I will say when I was looking into some of the different types of mystery science fiction books that exist, there are definitely some that caught my attention a little bit, that just sort of seemed interesting or
something
fun.
You would read?
Possibly,
from what you saw, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I think so. Okay, so when I was looking into things, I found a series by Mur Lafferty called The Midsolar Murders, and
I heard of that one.
Yeah, I think I bought you the first book. I think it's somewhere.
It's very possible.
There's so many. I know there's so many different bookcases in this place, and you wouldn't think, we don't have like a massive house of any kind, and you wouldn't think that I would lose things, but I definitely lose things. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, so the first book in the series is called Station Eternity, and basically, my understanding is that the series follows a sort of amateur detective named Mallory Veridian, who is running away from something that has occurred and is taking refuge on like an alien planet of some sort, and then winds up sort of having to solve mysteries while she's there, like murders that are taking place on the alien planet. and kind of navigating her way around that. And it sounded kind of interesting. It sounds like it has like an interesting kind of like a mishmash of both obviously very futuristic things, because she's literally on an alien planet, along with the addition of like, I don't know, like a 1960s like detective thriller kind of vibe to it. I mean, at least like that was sort of like what it gave me to an extent. And I think from what I read, they're also like kind of funny, like they're, not super serious. So
yeah, I mean, Mur Lafferty, I've read her 6 Weeks, which was one of my first introduction to her.
Yeah.
It's also a sci-fi mystery, murder mystery thing. Kind of plays into this, and it's essentially a closed room murder mystery where like a bunch of astronauts and crew members wake up, and then they find their own bodies that have been killed.
Oh, okay.
And then they have to find the whole mystery, because there's a whole thing that can like regenerate you and whatever it is, but someone killed them, and it's only 6 of them that are there. So kind of like what happened. And it's a closed room mystery and very, very interesting. But also it had that like a bit of like kind of funny element, and it was light. It wasn't too much of a crazy read. So I feel like that's her kind of style.
Okay.
She's also a big gamer, and she wrote a bunch of video game related books. She wrote a few of the...
You've lost it now.
Minecraft.
There you go.
She wrote a few of the Minecraft books, which again are like, a little bit more light and everything. So I think like I said, that's her style. Again.
Okay, yeah. So like maybe a little bit tongue in cheek, like a little bit fun and like self-aware to an extent. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's fun. There's also Blake Crouch, who I know is big in the sort of, science fiction, but more like basically set on Earth and stuff, like set in our world, but with like a different take on it kind of thing. So he has a novel called Dark Matter, which my understanding is very popular.
Yeah, they made a TV show on it.
No, that was Wayward Pines. That's his other series. I don't think Dark Matter is Dark Matter a TV show? I thought that was a different Dark Matter. I thought that was something else because it was like in space. Or am I thinking of something different? See, that's the problem. When they're in space, I don't pay attention.
Sorry. There's 2 TV shows called Dark Matter, and the former one was from 2014.
Okay.
But the one that I'm actually talking about is a series created by Blake Crouch.
Oh.
From 2024 on Apple TV Plus.
Oh.
So yeah, it is pretty new, and it is the whole thing. A physicist in Chicago is warped in an alternate version of his life, leaving him to fight to return to his life to prevent the alternate version of himself from taking over his family.
Okay, yeah, there you
That's
go.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
So sorry,
it's that. Okay.
It's that.
There's multiple Dark Matter shows.
There's more. Yeah.
How confusing. There's also I was also looking, right. And that's it. And there's also that's it. Blake Crouch famously also had that's it. He has a Wayward, his trilogy called Wayward Pines, which is also kind of a mishmash of like sci-fi and like fantasy, mystery, horror. Like it's like a little bit of everything in like a small town. I think also like in or around Chicago or something. I guess he's from that area.
It's one of those that is like if you like Silo that we're watching right now.
Yeah.
Very, very similar. A detective goes in this weird town and things are happening and he doesn't understand what's going on, and there's a whole mystery, and there's by the powers that be they're trying to obfuscate some things from him, not letting him find out, but then he tries to find out what it is. So there's a whole dark mystery of the town, and he also cannot leave.
Right,
so
yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's like see, I remember that because I think I watched like the first season of the show originally when it was on, which was like 2015 or something. And I remember there being a thing where you can't leave the city limits, like you're stuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like it was on one of the recommendations for people who want books like the TV. Like the Silo TV show,
yeah,
because it has very similar elements, right?
Yeah.
There's a mystery to uncover. There's powers that control everything. You cannot leave. You want to leave, but anyway. So
yeah, that's it. Like I guess Silo leans a little more heavily into the science fiction idea of things and like the dystopian idea of things, but it does still have a mystery element to it to a degree, right? Because slowly but surely, like that's it. The lead character kind of uncovers things about the Silo that she wasn't aware of before, and so the audience does as well. There's also the Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton wrote the Jurassic Park series, the books originally, which were published, I think, back in the 50s or the 60s. I think the Andromeda Strain's from like 1964 or 1969 or something. It's from a while ago, which basically is about a satellite that falls from space and lands in like a very rural town in Arizona. And then right after it does, basically, I believe that like military and stuff arrive, and the residents of the town have seemingly just dropped dead out of nowhere. And so they have to figure out like what's wrong with the satellite and what could have caused that to happen. Like seemingly like it's just like people were walking around having a normal day and they just like bam, gone.
I would read that.
Yeah,
sounds really cool.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And then in the totally other, like completely different kind of vein of things, which is like a really weird, sort of very speculative kind of one. There's a novel by an author named Jasper Ford. It's a detective series following a detective called Thursday Next. It's definitely a British series because it feels very English to me. The first novel in the series, I think there are 7 or 8 books, is called The Air Affair, and it's like a time/reality travel kind of thing where basically Thursday Next is a detective who is chasing a killer who's able to enter literary worlds and kill off literary characters. So in the first novel, she's following a killer who has entered the world of Jane Eyre to kill Jane Eyre and make it so that that literary character never existed.
So the books don't exist?
You can enter the realities of books, I guess, and he's trying to do that.
But does the actual book then not exist?
I guess so. I don't know. Unclear to me because I'd have to actually like read the series. Huh. But like that to me is like a very different kind of mystery that is science fiction based, right? Because you're talking about time travel. You're talking about travel into realities that don't actually exist, or the idea of entering into a book. So maybe, yeah, it has like some fantasy elements to it as well. But it seems to combine like kind of all of those things into
just
one.
Elements of sci-fi, not necessarily sci-fi settings.
No, exactly.
Which is the difference.
Yeah,
right?
That's it exactly. And I think that you can get a lot of that. And I think that again, that's where people like lose it with sci-fi because they assume that it has to be like astronauts in space, and that's not always the case.
Remember that next time you're picking up a sci-fi book.
Right. I know. I love that this is like also a message from me to me, apparently. Okay, so we're gonna talk about like your favorite one because let's be real, this is your favorite one.
We'll just spend the whole time talking about
the whole rest of the episode is about this, which is science fiction horror.
Best blend ever.
Which again, also that's it. Kind of, I would say like a lot of the time, like a science fiction book that takes on a lot of horror elements within it. Does it mean it has to be aliens? No, not necessarily. It could be about a virus. It could be like a zombie novel that's very heavily based in like science and stuff and scientific fact, right? So if you're thinking
hard science.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, that's it. Or if you're thinking of, I don't know, like The Girl with All the Gifts, or World War Z or things like that, because you do have a lot of science elements and people working towards finding cures for certain things. So like, you know, like I wouldn't necessarily say that about, let's say, like The Walking Dead, but I would say that about like World War Z or The Girl with All the Gifts and things like that. That would be for me what would like work into that. You know, there could be like an attack of some kind from some unknown entity, a monster that, again, that's it. It could be like alien-esque, but it could be something else too, depending on the story.
Yeah, it could be a virus that you cannot get rid of.
Yeah, that's it. It could be, well, I mean...
attacks your physical body, attacks your mental state.
A lot of people consider that to an extent. The Stand kind of falls into that sci-fi horror category to an extent because it's a disease, right? And yes, I understand that the disease has like metaphysical kind of aspects to it because of like the entity that permeates and sort of creates the illness, but that's just sort of a personification of the idea of that disease to an extent, right? Like Randall Flagg and like that whole thing. Yeah,
in a sense.
Technically one of the first iterations of this, and this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a monster, is Frankenstein. Because largely that's it. Frankenstein's considered basically like one of the first science fiction novels basically ever. It was published in 1818, mind you. I mean,
if that's what they thought sci-fi is, I just don't consider it sci-fi. For me, this is more of a monster fiction.
Yeah, but it's
story.
monster like science fiction. So
it's because it had science attached to it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it follows Victor Frankenstein while he's, you know, him and his god complex basically are trying to be able to reanimate dead flesh. To make a dead person whole again and make them functional again and stuff. So technically there is a lot of like that aspect to it.
There is a science element to it.
Definitely, yes. But it does largely fall into that category, and I see it classified as such like almost all the time. So
just a weird thing to think of, but
because again, we always think about it in the classic horror monster story kind of thing, and yeah, a lot of it is. But, you know, even though, like, the Frankenstein's monster isn't really the monster of the story, like, it's Victor Frankenstein himself most of the time, so... Anyway, but, like, okay, fine. So, like, monsters, like, let's say in a different capacity, like, I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, I think falls into that kind of category as well.
That's the name of the movie.
Very funny. Because, you know, it's, like, we're talking a post-apocalyptic event, which has created, I guess, from some sort of virus or something, has created, like... zombie vampires? They're kind of vampires. They're supposed to be.
Kinda. Yeah. I
mean, like per
they're,
the
like,
original.
afraid of the light.
Yeah, that's
and then
it.
They're trying to eat you.
So, and I mean, per like the descriptions, I've never read the novel. Like I've seen the film, but I've never read the novel. And per the descriptions that I've seen of the novel, they are described more as vampires than zombies. So, I mean, granted, also, like, this novel was published a long time ago, and the traditional, like, modern zombie, I think this was pre-Night of the Living Dead. So I don't think that we had, like, gotten super duper into that. Like, zombies were still, like, a hoodoo voodoo thing at the time.
Right.
Especially in films and, like, books and stuff. So it was a little bit different. But yeah, that's it. Obviously, it's, like, a post-apocalyptic event and follows a man who's trying not to get eaten by seemingly every other person around him has been turned into a vampire of some kind. Okay, so you read this one, The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling, which follows a caver, basically, who's kind of dealing with her own issues, who takes a job on, like, another planet and then, I guess, comes across more than she's expecting to.
It's, first of all, absolutely amazing. If you have not read it, you should pick it up. Super claustrophobic to read, which is kind of weird to say, but just the way that it's described and the setting and the way that you really, really get into it and the character, you feel claustrophobic because it's a caver and she goes into a cave on an alien planet and she has to reach certain levels because something happened.
Right.
And the only thing that she has is herself and a person who's supposed to be guiding her that she hates. So there's a whole hate relationship, but she also is dependent on her to survive what she's doing. And on top of that, there is, I don't want to spoil it, I guess, monsters or entities in the cave that also make it difficult for her to accomplish her mission. But it's super well done. It's super well written. It's a female protagonist, and the person that she's dealing with, a very hateful character. And a lot of the things that do happen in there in terms of, like, mental strain and the things and the experiences that she has had that led her to there are also very, very relatable.
Okay, and then next, I'm just going to say, because I love we have, like, two different ones on here, but really, let's be real. It's everything by David Wellington.
Yes. Oh, my God.
So The Last Astronaut, which you've already read.
He is so good.
And you've read Paradise 1.
Paradise 1, and now I'm reading Revenant X
at the moment as well.
Part of the Red Space series. It's going to be 3 books, Paradise 1, Revenant X, and another one that he's currently writing on. I spoke to him about it. I had an interview with him. He's working on it right now. Not much else to be revealed from that. But it is 3 books. Very, very interesting. Paradise 1, which I finished just recently. It's one of those books that kind of flips the horror sci-fi aspect on its head a little bit. So it's not a monster. It's not something that tries to kill you at the base of it. It's actually a entity that instills a intrusive thought in your head that you cannot get out. So, for example, it would tell you that you are always hungry. Despite the fact that you can eat all the food you have, you'll always be hungry. And then what happens with that when you've eaten everything on a spaceship, because of course it's sci-fi, right? So it's always on a spaceship and whatever it is, people start eating each other and themselves. So there's like a zombie aspect to it. There's a lot of other examples that happen to this because there's a lot of intrusive thoughts that you can...
But cannibalism's a big one, I guess.
Cannibalism is a big one because it's very easy, right? But there's another one, for example, that it tells... Well, the intrusive thought is that you forget how to breathe. So you have to consciously think that you have to exhale and inhale. And you can't go to bed, right? Because you will die, essentially. So, like, what does that entail to a whole colony of people that are on a planet? It's a crazy idea. When I was reading it, I was like, wow, okay, I never have thought of it in that way. But it is that. So there's a lot of other elements that come into play.
Right.
But essentially that's what it is, right? It's a Red Space series, and it's a story of that follows a rescue mission on a planet called Paradise 1, where there's a colony there that has gone completely silent.
Right.
And what you find out is that there is this entity that infects anyone who comes near that planet with intrusive thoughts.
Right, okay, so all of them are dead, I assume.
Dead, not dead. Some of them are not dead. Some of them are just, have to... I don't want to spoil too many things.
Okay.
But the thing is, not all of them are dead.
Okay, fine.
Because you can have intrusive thoughts that like, there's a bug somewhere and we have to find it.
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
no,
like there's a spaceship that is like super clean.
Yeah.
And people are just super obsessed with it and they try to, dissect things and whatever it is.
Yeah,
so
they're like hyper focused on like
exactly,
one
yeah. So
task.
not all dead.
Okay.
But there's a lot of very, very interesting elements to it.
Okay. All right. Well, And then, but see, and I'm glad that I like thought of this, and I'm glad I found this when we were looking at stuff the other day. We just picked up a novel called William by Mason Coley or Colley, I'm not sure, which was published this year. Which, again, it is science fiction, but sci-fi horror that takes like a totally different kind of direction. So essentially, like what it seems to be bare bones is that it's a haunted house story. But the thing doing the haunting is AI. It's not a traditional ghost or demon or entity in that kind of way. There's like an agoraphobe who has invented this AI that he calls William. And then, of course, like as per many, many stories that involve an AI of some kind, it begins to become like sentient in its own way and tries to, probably take over.
What a perfect time to publish that book. 2024, the whole AI boom.
But
and
see,
everything.
that's the thing too, is that like that's it. Like, see, when we picked that up, and we were at the bookstore, and I picked that up and read the description or the synopsis of the novel, and I was just like, see, this just sounds like, for me, that's the kind of like sci-fi horror that I'll find interesting. Is that it's something that for me is based in my own reality. Like we see advancements in AI here on a daily basis. I Google something and AI now on Google brings up like the quickest response for me when I look for it and stuff. But you know what I mean? Like it's something that I'm seeing constantly all the time. So I feel like it's, I find like, I don't know, I find like even in my horror stuff in general, do I like ghost stories and stories of maybe demonic possession or things like that? 100%. But the things that scare me the most, the majority of the time, are the things that involve real people doing really fucked up things. Yeah. Because it feels like it's a possibility no matter what. So I find that something like that is more like my cup of tea in terms of like picking up like a sci-fi novel to read. That's something that I'm going to be more interested in.
Right. Yeah. Right. Makes sense. Should we disconnect our Google Home or...
No. It turns on the lights. It does things. It tells us what the weather's like. We need to know. Okay. So now we get into maybe some of the ones, that are, I guess, still big, but at the same time, like maybe we don't always like think of them quite as much necessarily. So like, obviously a mix of sci-fi fantasy. That one I still think gets a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
That gets a lot of
screen time. You just don't think that it could be the fantasy thing, but it is.
No, but it is. And it's true. Like, look, like, like Dune.
Yeah.
Dune definitely falls into that. You're talking about, like, like their whole sand. Is it sand or dust or what do they call it?
Dusty sand.
Salt, whatever the fuck they call it. The thing in the air that, like, kills you or whatever it is. Sorry, I don't know anything about Dune. People are going to be so mad. I'd never read the books. I saw part of like the old movie.
It's spice.
And it was, thank you. And I didn't like it. I started watching the first of the new ones and I didn't like it.
You're just digging your own grave here. Let's keep
going. Part of the way through. I'm sorry. It's not for me. Okay. It's for a lot of people, but it's not for me. I don't care about Timothée Chalamet's cheekbones that much. It's fine. So, like, Dune, you loved To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini, who, like, is largely a fantasy author a lot of the time, so I'm not surprised that he has, like, he wrote Aragon.
Yeah, that's it.
So I'm not surprised that he has, like, a crossover type of thing in there, right?
Yeah, so this one's kind of, like, I guess it could be debated because it is a little bit more sci-fi leaning into hard science than fantasy, but there are fantasy elements to it, so it's one of those that kind of, like, intertwines things in there, There's, like, the whole epic scope and world building thing. There's philosophical and existential undertones or questions that are being asked, but there's also like another part towards the end of the book where there's kind of like an entity that can do crazy things that are not necessarily sci-fi based. Like it's more of a fantastical elements to that entity. But yeah, so like the elements leak into this book from his fantasy writing that he did with the whole dragons and everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then there's things like that's the Dark Tower series has a lot of that because yes, I know everybody's like Stephen King's a horror author, but like not all the time. And he has dipped his toes. We have a couple on this list in different places. He has dipped his toes into like different things, and one of those is with Dark Tower series, which is like I would say largely dark fantasy science fiction. Like it's got like a lot of elements of both of those things. It's I can't even. First of all, it would spoil it. Like the series is quite long. It's 7 books, I believe. Yeah.
I think so.
And it's
7 or 8
and
books.
it's pretty heavy, like reaching in the sense that there's a ton of like world building and stuff in
So
it. So
much.
there's like a lot to get into.
So much.
You've read like the
I've read
entire series.
all
so,
of them.
Yeah.
And it is like his biggest or most important work that he's done. And interestingly enough, the first one he wrote when he was like pretty young. He was like around 25 to 30, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then when he realized how big it is going to get and how important the world building of that part is going to be, he basically stopped writing. And then he picked up the second book like 15 years later or something like that.
Because he was like, oh, I don't want to do this right now.
No, well, I don't think he...
Maybe he didn't know how to tackle it.
Either that or he like understood he didn't have the skill because he was such a young writer to write it to that scale.
I mean, already to write like the first one in general, like don't you feel sometimes when you read stuff like this that you're like, I've accomplished nothing in my life?
No, I mean, it's insane. So like, it has a lot of fantasy elements to it, a lot of sci-fi elements to it.
Yeah.
It does have like kind of like a dystopian setting to it, but there's also some magic in there.
Yeah.
And there's some sci-fi stuff.
And it combines like
combines a lot of things.
And it combines like real world with like an alternate world kind of thing that's been created, right? Like you have crossovers between like Earth that exists and this other world also.
Yeah, and he also writes himself into that book, which is a whole other story.
Of course he does. Oh, yeah. Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, I think, is a whole series as well, right? And that one seems to combine a ton of science fiction and fantasy. There are how many?
I think there was like 13 books or something.
What? No. I didn't even think they'd been published for that long.
There is 4.
Oh, okay.
I was thinking of something else. What the hell was I thinking of?
What are you thinking of? Okay, doesn't matter. Yeah, those ones, as far as I can tell, they're very, very heavy with the fantasy and sci-fi. Don't they follow like a necromancer or something? There's like a bunch of like sort of fantastical elements mixed in with the science fiction there. So that's cool. That's interesting. Actually, I think we have a review of Gideon the Ninth on the website from one of our contributors. So yeah, that's it. That's an interesting one. Oh yeah. Okay. Yes. Obviously. Speaking of more Stephen King, see, you also get into the sort of science fiction and historical fiction kind of crossovers with stuff. And so with that, we're talking about something like 11/22/63. We've done a whole episode about 11/22/63 and the miniseries that was done in like the late 2010s or something.
That's pretty good.
It is pretty good. So like that's a really interesting one. That one, it combines time travel with the historical fiction, so you get that science fiction aspect of it as well. But it's largely like Earth reality based, but it does still have that sci-fi element to it because time travel, magic.
Yeah, it depends how much sci-fi you add into a story.
Yeah.
It could be very much historical fiction, but just because there's time travel,
there's some
it becomes
sci-fi
into it, right? So you can be leaning heavy into sci-fi, which is where you get, the whole spaceship and aliens and whatever it is, or if you just add one element to it, everything else could be a whole other genre. Yeah. But it will also have some sci-fi into it because it has time travel, because it has I don't know, an alien that comes over, whatever.
Yeah. And then there are things like Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick is obviously a pretty big one too. Like, yes, it's very historical fiction because it's like, one of the many historical fiction stories that posits the idea of like, obviously, what if the Nazis won World War II? Yeah.
Actually, we when we researched that for some articles, there's a lot of that.
There are so many World War II historical fiction novels.
It's like a whole subgenre.
We did an entire episode talking about like why there are so many of those because we did a whole historical fiction month in November. Yeah. And holy shit, God, it's like it's never ending almost the number of them, and they're still published on a semi-regular basis as well. Like I think, that's it. Like obviously World War II was such a massive part of our reality, and there's still such a large core, for the time being anyway, of a generation that was alive during at least a portion of it. So I think that's probably also partially why we see so much still to this day. But it's an interesting kind of read anyway. There are just so many. I mean, like, okay, so beyond that, you technically see, I didn't really know this, but we actually found some when we started looking into it. Apparently there's like, you know, a decent number of novels that are sci-fi romance, which like, who knew?
Not surprised.
I shouldn't be surprised. There's there's like fantasy romance.
Plus any other genre exists.
There's
Whatever
like
it is,
mystery romance,
exists.
there's fantasy romance. Why wouldn't there be sci-fi romance, right? So there are novels like things called How to Steal a Galaxy by Beth Revis, which is a novella, it says? Yeah, that's it. Okay, which is like a heist, but like, I think it's some sort of probably like heist in space or something. Anyway, whatever. It's a romance book. Collision Course by Michelle Diener.
Yeah, it's a woman
This doesn't even sound romantic. That just sounds terrifying. All of this just sounds scary.
Yeah, but it's because she's with her partner. And there's a romance aspect there.
Fine.
Well, check out the last one. The AI Who Loved Me.
The AI Who Loved Me by
Alyssa
Alyssa Cole.
Cole.
Oh, I've read Alyssa Cole before.
There you go.
She's pretty big in the romance world in the first place, and she's also written one or two thrillers, which I've read as well.
Yeah, so this one, you know, woman moves in, recovering from her trauma, moves into a new place. She's intrigued by her mysterious neighbor, who turns out to be
An AI,
an AI.
of course.
So it leads to a whole, you know, adventurous love story. Which I don't know how that's gonna work, but that's, you know.
Side tangent, when I was looking at when I was just like Googling like romance, sci-fi or sci-fi romance, I got a lot of like this Barbarian series by an author named Ruby Dixon, which is just like, it's monster romance basically, but I guess with like slightly alien types like mailman characters. Your eyebrows just shut up. Monster romance is its own subgenre. That is a thing that exists that I have come across multiple times. And apparently there is a market for it in the sci-fi world as well. So who knew?
There's also a market on it for somewhere else in the world of
Oh,
internet. But
I guarantee that there is. And I'm sure if you went looking, it wouldn't take you very long to find it either. No. And you know what I realized we forgot in the mystery one, too? It's that one that you read by Chris Hadfield. Isn't that one? The Apollo Murders. Isn't that like a mystery science fiction kind of thing? Isn't it about like Cold War era murders in space or something?
I mean, there's no... Yes. It's not really a mystery. It's more of a thriller. There's no mystery to it.
Oh, really?
Is that... Yeah, no, it is in space, and there is like a mission...
Sure.
That needs to happen to sabotage some things, but the orders are given from two different parties to, you know, basically have a war in space.
Oh.
Yeah. There's no real mystery.
Okay,
it's more of a thriller thing.
Okay, so it's more of like, well, I mean, mystery, thriller, those are like, boop.
I guess.
You know, they kind of go together. No. But, okay, yeah. See, there's just so many, and I didn't know half of these when I started looking into it. I feel like I've learned something.
Yeah.
That's going to be exciting this month. Will just be me learning things. We're going to watch some movies this month that people will be, I'm sure, shocked to know that I've never seen before, including, I think, the first one that we're watching this month I've never watched. So that will be interesting. No. So anyway, we'll see how the month goes, but it's gonna be a new one for me to break down all of this stuff. Hey, you're excited.
I'm excited. We're watching the Alien series right now.
We are watching the Alien series right now. Guys, that third one's really bad. We just watched it the other night. Holy crap, it's so terrible.
Well, compared to the other ones.
I mean, yeah, okay, fine. I think
has gotten worse.
So I think as somebody who's like into horror, I had only watched the first two ever, and then you saw Alien Romulus when it came out last summer, and you really liked it, so you were like, we should watch it, and then we decided to just like do a watch through of the series, so we're like making our way through that slowly but surely, and yeah, that's it. I'm now understanding maybe why I've just never watched any of the like subsequent further down the road sequels when they kind of got into those past Aliens, because I was like, oh wow, bad, so terrible.
Yeah, they get better.
Do they?
They get more entertaining.
You know what? I just want to watch Alien versus Predator so I can see the alien and the Predator beat each other up, and that'll be great.
That's the thing that gets better.
That's all I want to do.
It just becomes more entertaining. Aliens fighting each other.
Apparently, until we watch those Prometheus prequels or whatever the fuck they are.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah. Okay. See, that's it.
It's a weird yo-yo effect.
It seems to. It's one of those franchises that like has like a lot of like a boomerang kind of thing where it bounces back and forth between very good and very bad.
It's weird.
Okay.
It's weird. Well, we're watching it all.
It's fine. I'm looking forward to it. Apparently, the month of January is just a science fiction month for my whole life, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway. You guys can feel free, obviously, to check out all of our sci-fi coverage for this month. That'll be kind of coming your way on the website as well, which is at fullybooked.ca. You can always check out all of that out, and we have some lovely contributors who are regularly putting out some really great writing and really great articles, which is wonderful, and we love you guys 100%. And we appreciate you very much. And you can definitely feel free to check out our social media, obviously, at Instagram and where are we? Instagram, TikTok,
Threads.
That's
Blue
it. Thank
Sky.
you. Blue Sky. Yeah. Are we on Blue Sky now? Announcement.
We're on Blue Sky.
At Fully Booked CA. Is it Fully Booked CA everywhere?
Yep.
Okay, great. And then you can always check out our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/book-was-way-better. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Ciao, guys.